Good morning and welcome to Ed's World, where it's always morning, even in the afternoon. My guest today is known by many names indeed, and just so we have a name that we can call him, there are those that call him Tim. I'm talking this week to the owner of Jim Acosta's parody account, Tim. Welcome to Ed's World.
Thank you, Ed.
How's your weekend been going?
Fantastic. I took my son out to the shooting range. He's 11. We got a little practice in with the 22 caliber rifle, and we even went over to the powder range and shot off a couple of muskets.
Ooh, I hope he had ear protection for that.
We did. We did. The one I was shooting was an actual 1840 musket, not a replica. So it was
Oh
pretty
wow.
amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing. It's amazing when you can get your hands on technology like that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we've got a well, we actually have one less topic than I usually have on the show today, but we are going to spend a lot of time talking about the debates. But before we get started, I want to talk about some confirmation bias with the political compass test because there are people that swear by it, and I think that the result that I got when I took it on air was relatively accurate. I think it did pretty well for me, but I've seen some other people where it's been inaccurate within a couple weeks, and of course we had the picture floating around that showed that all of the presidential candidates that are currently out, save for a handful, are up in that authoritarian right range. So, believe it or not, everybody who's running for the president on the Democrat side is officially a Nazi, according to Twitter.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
And of
That's
course,
to me those tests don't really reflect American values. They seem to reflect more European values because to me there really isn't a right authoritarian. The two don't mesh.
well, yes and no. I know somebody who is actually very right authoritarian. He's been on this show before, and I've seen him take his political compass test, and that's where I started thinking about confirmation bias for the first time. And this was months ago because he took it by himself, and he got further to the top to the authoritarian side and further to the right than he did when he took it on the generational gap. So, and
Okay,
I think there is some confirmation bias, and if you're doing it on the air, I think you're going to answer differently than you would if you're in the privacy of your own home with all the lights off.
sure.
At one point, I actually should sit down and take it for myself because that's the only way I've taken it was on generational gap.
I took one myself not long ago, and it came out pretty much where I thought it would, where I was conservative with a little bit of a libertarian lean.
I was pretty well nestled down in that bottom right corner.
I was kind of along the line in the right side there.
Wow.
So,
Before we do get started here, anybody who's listening back to this on Tuesday or later should go back and check out the generational gap. From what I understand, our good friend Linda, who is the one that actually introduced it, we've talked before, but the one that actually got us to talking directly, is going to be on the generational gap. For us, it's tonight, but for everybody else, it was yesterday. So everybody go back and check them out. You can find all of their episodes over on Freedom Scoop, where you can also find this podcast. As I mentioned, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about tonight, and we're going to start out on the darker side of things. There were two shootings within 24 hours, one in Ohio and one in El Paso. We'll talk about some of the differences there, some of the motives, and what the media is talking about with this. The debates were on this past week, and there was a lot of stuff that came out of that, and most of the world at this point with the shootings have almost forgotten about this, but we'll look back and we'll talk about what happened on those nights and talk about who might be the next president of the United States. Hopefully, none of the people that were on the stage. Jeffrey Epstein was found with neck wounds in his cell, and Twitter was alight with Clinton body count. So we'll talk about what happened there and what that could have been. And I don't talk much about Hollywood on this show because I really don't give a damn, but there are two stories out there that kind of piqued my interest coming out of the southwest corner of this country. So we'll talk a little bit about what happened there and how all of this relates with what we see in politics now. It is going to be all of this and more on Ed's World. Thanks for subscribing and watching this on YouTube and BitChute. If you're not already subscribed, please go down and hit that subscribe button and hit that like button as well. That tells YouTube what people should be watching. If you're listening back to this on an audio platform, make sure you subscribe on that as well. It's so much easier to take us on the go if you are subscribed on that audio platform. We are on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. And if you are on iTunes, please hit that 5-star rating and leave us a good review. That helps us move up the charts and again tells Apple what people should be listening to. Ed's World is proudly partnered with the Freedom Scoop Media Group. A reminder to everybody who listens to the show that we are still holding open casting for writers. If you would like to write written articles for the Freedom Scoop Media Group, give me an email, edsblogtwitter@gmail.com. We will get you a sample article and we will see what you've got and we'll see if we can work something out. After a lengthy introduction, one of my favorite parts of this show is to find out about the most important part of Ed's World. So, Tim, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am 47 years old. I live in the Philadelphia suburbs. I have a wife and I have a son who many of you might have known as Look at Me Jr. previously. He now goes by Journalismator Jr.
Nice.
He's 11 years old, and yeah, he's the biggest joy in my life.
I heard a lot of people with kids say that too, and it's a beautiful thing. I don't have any kids of my own, but maybe someday.
Not
I'd
that
like
you
to.
know of.
Yeah, yeah. No, my cousin's wife has tried to pull that one on me too, and I guess anything's possible, but without going into too much details, I don't think that's going to be quite possible right now. Now, you are best known on Twitter, and you've actually been shut down before as not Tim, but actually somebody who makes fun of Jim Acosta. And from what I understand, that you've been suspended and had one account shut down over that. So how did you decide to get into parodying Mr. Acosta?
Well, I first got onto Twitter in about May of last year, so it's been a little over a year. And within a month of being online, there was I don't even remember what the specific situation was, because this was pre-Kavanaugh and this was pre the whole debacle where he got his press pass taken. But he was just Twitter blasting left and right. And yeah, he just came across to me as, like he does on TV, as so condescending and smug that I decided I had to do it. At the time, I was also, and I still do, I listen to the Andrew Klavan show on podcast, and he always introduces Jim as, "Look at me, I'm Jim Acosta, look at me." So that was my original version of it, was "Look at me, Jim Acosta." And after it seems like every time I would get too many times where I'd post at Acosta on something, I would find myself temporarily suspended by Twitter. So I think I might have actually been getting under his skin, or somebody at CNN, and so that was getting me reported. And I got to a point where they started suspending me for imitation, which I can't imagine you would believe that I was Jim Acosta the way I post on there. But I got suspended twice for imitation. The second time, I changed my bio, my picture, everything on there, and I asked them if it was, approved. They wrote me back and they said they would unsuspend me because it was approved, and only to find out about 2 months later that I was permanently suspended again for imitation. So I had to come back on with a brand new handle, new account and everything. I lost about 5,000 followers.
Wow.
And started over again at 0. I'm still in the low hundreds at this point. So anyone out there who used to follow me, please look me up again. I'm at Journalismator.
And that will be linked in the description below, and you'll have a chance to review again and put that out at the end of the show as well.
Thank you, Ed.
You know what my favorite Klavan instance of Look at Me was? He was talking
What's
about
that?
somebody at CNN had written something anonymously. I think it was back to the White House press pass, and this person had written anonymously because he didn't want to be identified. And the anonymous post was, "Look at me. I'm Jim Acosta. Look over here. Look at me."
Yeah, I can imagine that. I can't imagine he's a pleasant guy to work with.
Well, maybe we'll find out. Maybe one day alt media will be in the press pool.
Who knows? Who knows?
I'm not
Yeah,
saying me, but I definitely think that Freedom Scoop could use some representation over there. And I happen to know somebody that lives pretty close to the area.
I'd be more than happy to be the White House correspondent for NPC Daily.
Well, we've had some fun here, and this was great, but we got to start out dark here, and
Okay.
we've got to we've got to give our condolences where condolences are necessary. And I know that everyone on the left that says enough with thoughts and prayers, let's just confiscate all the guns, but this past Saturday, there were two mass shootings within 24 hours of each other. It appears that they were in two very different states and they were two very situations. To start with, about 10:39 Central Time in the morning, a suspect that will not be named on the show entered a Walmart and started shooting. Now, suspect from the El Paso situation, this is still developing and we're still learning a lot about this, but it appears that he had a manifesto on 8chan, which I've got my own opinions about 8chan, but I've expressed some of that as well, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But he went in guns blazing because apparently he wanted to go and eliminate all kinds of brown people. Now, for starters, everybody started up on the anti-gun threads and trying to blame this on the president as well, including some pictures we'll look at here in just a bit. But the suspect in El Paso was shot on site and is not, or I'm sorry, the suspect in El Paso was taken into custody. It's the Dayton one that was killed. So the suspect in El Paso was taken into custody, and he will be facing some questions, and hopefully we'll get some answers out of that. But what did you see about this on Saturday?
When it first started coming out, I remember all the news that I could see about it was that he was a Trump supporter. He was alt right. He was So I started doing a little digging of my own,
Mm-hmm.
and I looked into that manifesto, and I actually searched it up online and all of that sort of thing. And this guy seemed to be more of a, I wouldn't even call him alt right. He was actually kind of he had a weird mix of ideologies. Uh, he was an eco. He considered himself an eco terrorist, like the guys in Christchurch. Um, he definitely had, white supremacist, white nationalist views. Um, but I wouldn't have necessarily pegged him as being, the Republican type.
Right.
He certainly seemed to have a very strange hodgepodge of ideas on how things should be.
Yeah, and that's something that's actually weirded me out. I've had some time and had some experience with. They wouldn't call themselves alt righters, but they were straight up anti anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist Nazis. They invaded Matt and Blonde's server at one point, and I actually got to engage with some of them. And one of the things that I noticed right away while I was engaged in talking to them is the fact that the alt-right, so-called, the people that consider themselves to be Nazis and want to wipe the Jews and other brown-skinned races off of the map, their words, not mine, they actually do have very socialistic tendencies. They do want to have a redistributionist state. But the problem is who's going to be the donor and who's actually carrying all the money. Now, the socialists would, of America anyway, would say that it's just the rich and the upper 1% that are hoarding all the money and keeping it away from everybody, and they want to get it out of their hands and distribute it. But engaging with some of these Nazis that I saw, these guys they want to redistribute the wealth of the world, but it's after they get it out of the hands of the Jewish people that are hoarding it. Again, their words, not mine.
That's kind of what I've seen too. I don't deal a lot with people in that group, but the ones that I've seen do seem to be kind of socialist but nationalists, and it doesn't really blend with what I would consider anything on the right, except the nationalism which a lot of people on the right tend to follow.
Right. Right.
So
Nationalism and right wing, especially in this country, does seem to be small government versus big government. And, you know, you hate to quote Alex Jones when you're talking about this, but it does seem to be nationalist versus globalist as well. Get
uh,
protect your own and before
that's
going into globalism.
that's kind of what I see as well. I see the right wing in this country as being nationalism as opposed to globalism, as opposed to nationalism, as opposed to like white nationalism. Um, but they tend to be small government people, and the people on the left who like big government and like redistribution. I guess no one wants to claim these people, but
Well, there's a difference there too because I mean in Europe there is no small government. It's
exactly,
it's big government, but it's whether you have big government out of your nation or the big super government of the EU. Seems to be
exactly,
the
yeah.
difference that they have over there. But either
They
way,
seem
it's
to
it's
be
always a
right
big
wing
government thing.
European.
Yep.
So yeah, I think we're on the same page on that. And I'll tell you, I guess I heard that two more of the victims had passed away. It's just terrible that these things happen. But I heard also that that shopping center was supposedly a gun-free zone. And what does that do? That leaves people left there as victims. They don't have a chance to defend themselves.
Yeah, that is a big part of the conversation right now again, and that's people are saying, well, gun-free zone is not a thing because, a good guy with a gun is not I saw good guy with a gun was trending on Twitter and a lot of people were detracting from that idea and a lot of people are trying to detract from the idea of a gun-free zone, but I mean, when I first saw this was in Texas, I thought that the narrative was over, and now we were actually going to sit down and have a conversation about this. But yeah, you're right. We go back and we find out that while Texas itself is a very gun-friendly place, the shopping center itself was another soft target that nobody ever thought to defend. I guess I don't know where I was going with that, but
And that's where these maniacs go. That they look for the soft targets.
now from what I understand, and I've been media blacked out over the weekend, so a lot of this stuff I'm learning for the first time today. And you may have to help me out a little bit on these shooting ones, to be completely honest. But from what I understand, this in the El Paso shooting, there was indeed a good guy with a gun, an armed army veteran, rushed in to try and defend some children, and that's a story I saw right away on the news, but it seemed to drop off almost immediately as soon as
I
it started
saw
up.
something about that as well, but again, like you, it just seemed to disappear in an instant, and I don't know what happened after that. But yeah, I did see something about that as well.
So kudos to the good guy with the gun that went in to try and protect the children. And this is, of course, a developing
Absolutely.
story. And if I know anything about our friends over on Twitter and in the mainstream media, we are going to be talking about this particular shooting for a very long time. So pay attention for details on that.
Yes, I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon.
Before I get into the gun control argument, actually, before I do that, I did want to bring this one picture up because, no, I do. I'm going to wait until we get into the argument with this. I want to pass some remembrance along as well for the victims of the Dayton shooting. Now, approximately 1 a.m. Eastern Time, a shooter attacked what looked like, and again, media blackout for the weekend. I didn't see a lot about this, and this is one that's going to disappear very quickly, but it looks like a shooter went into a shopping area with a bar and started shooting. And this gentleman was actually killed by police. But it turned out that while we were looking at this, he had his into his Twitter profile, and he seemed to be quite a left winger himself. So that's why my fear is that this is going to be one that falls out of the news. What did you see on this one?
I saw the same thing. He apparently retweeted a lot of things from Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. He was a big supporter of those. So he appears to be, an out and out socialist. I believe he had tweets supporting Antifa as well. I don't know what the purpose of this one, but apparently one of the victims in this was his sister.
Yeah, I saw that.
And he was decked out in full body armor, and I think he was determined to, suicide by police was his final goal in this thing.
Now, it appears that in both cases the shooters used high-powered rifles. And because of that, we are going to be hearing about this considerably. And one of the first things that I saw on this, and this is what got me kind of interested in all of this, let me get the picture loaded up here. Come on. There it goes. So what I have here, this was tweeted out by Morgan Freeman, and he says that this is from the murderer's Facebook page, and this is hashtag the El Paso shooting. And what we see on the screen, if because I don't have video share for you, Tim, or for those of you listening back on the audio platforms, is a series of various guns put together to spell out Trump's last name, just sitting up on the screen. And I looked at this right away. I recognized it because I've seen it on Facebook before, I've seen it on Reddit before, and I've seen it on Twitter before. And no, this was not from the murderer's Facebook page. Well, I mean, he might have shared it somewhere down the road, but he did not create this.
No, I've seen that before myself. That was definitely not an original item. That's been around for I would say at least a year and a half to 2 years.
Yeah. But they're trying to paint the narrative, of course, when they're trying to make certain things happen out of this, and this is something we're going to be listening to for quite a while.
Oh, sure. I always say it in my when I post online. The narrative is king. So if something fits the narrative, it will be pushed. If something doesn't fit the narrative, it will disappear.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, there have already been the calls to gun control, and I mean, we've got this Emmy Award winner as well that decided that he wanted to tell us how he really felt as far as guns go, and this is Pine Tar Guy from Twitter that says, "Fuck your fucking guns, you small cock pricks."
That's a typical sentiment from the left. I guess they think that we think of guns as what makes us manly, but I think I think that having a gun doesn't make you manly. I think part of being a man and standing up for your family and your own rights is having a gun.
Yeah, and that's absolutely perfect as well, but I mean, that seems to be the idea that they think this is going to be the end-all cure-all, and that is the fact that they're going to ban guns and there's suddenly going to be no more violence like this. And I mean, the
Sure.
first thing that
They did. Look what happened in Great Britain. They made guns illegal, and now people are being murdered by knives.
well, they banned knives too, so now people are cutting their tomatoes for their salads with their hands. But I mean, it's acid,
karate
it's
chop will
trucks,
do it.
it's
It's you can't stop people from doing evil things. The largest terrorist attack in this country was done with box cutters.
yeah.
The largest domestic terror attack in this country was done with a truck full of fertilizer. So if people want to kill people, they're going to find a way to do it.
Well, yeah, and I mean, of course, now too, we're going to look back and we're going to see that we've had more mass shootings in this country than we've had days in the year for 2019. which is
Yes, actually, over the weekend there was a third mass shooting that didn't make the news at all because it was a shooting in Chicago, and it involved gang members, and there were 7 people killed in that shooting, and I think somewhere in the teens or low 20s that were injured.
well,
And I
that's
didn't even see that one in the news.
well, and that's absolutely right too. That's one thing that nobody seems to bring up when they talk about any of this is the fact that okay, we've got 23 people that passed away in El Paso, Texas, and I feel for all of those 23 people. That's a slow weekend in Chicago.
Exactly.
And I
And
mean,
most of those people are killed by handguns.
yeah. And I see all the stories that come from that too. I mean, I can see the Sun Times and I can see WGN. It's one of the things that's in my news stack because that's only 2 hours over there from where I'm sitting right
Sure.
now. So that's pretty local for me.
Yeah. Well, I follow both of them. I follow the Chicago Tribune on Twitter because I just want to make sure I'm keeping up. I follow all the major newspapers. I follow all the major networks and all of the cable networks because I want to keep up on what's going on. That's part of what I have to do as my Twitter persona.
I want to talk about the motives of the media in all of this for just a moment here. And I don't mean to put the tinfoil on when I talk about this, but I mean, this is something that I think needs to be brought up. I mean, I forgot to put Baltimore in the stack for the day, but that doesn't mean that this doesn't play a key role in what's going on here because it was just the same when we were under Obama. We heard all of these major news stories. They covered the news for weeks on end, but before we could get any sort of outcome or any sort of closure to any of these stories, something else happened and they disappeared out of the news.
Yep.
And I have to wonder, especially with this one guy being such an absolute leftist, if this wasn't, I don't want to say something coordinated, but I'm not that tinfoily, but I mean, it's just like Bush and 9/11. I don't think that he had anything to do with that, but he wasn't going to let a good tragedy go to waste.
Absolutely, yeah. And you know what, at the time I supported going into Afghanistan. I don't think Iraq was necessarily a good idea, but I supported going into Afghanistan because we did need to respond.
Hmm.
But now we're boots on the ground in how many countries in the Middle East?
Every country in the Middle East,
Yeah,
every country in that subcontinent has an American flag in it. And I don't know why.
yeah, I don't either. I admit we need to protect our ally Israel, but we don't need to be everywhere at once.
But I look at this now and I have not heard the word Baltimore since Saturday
Yep.
at all. I haven't heard about Elijah Cummings. I take that back. I have heard one story about Jack Posobiec and Scott Pressler actually in Baltimore picking up trash and trying to clean up the city. And a lot of people on the left are now trying to say that they're just virtue signaling and trying to score political points out of this. But I'm like, no, well, maybe they are, but they're still cleaning something up that the representation of that city doesn't seem to want to do.
I can't take it seriously when the left accuses anyone on the right of virtue signaling.
That's a fair point. Speaking of virtue signaling, and pay attention to this Dayton story and pay attention to the El Paso story. They are still developing, and we do send all of our thoughts and prayers out to the victims of this. But we had one other major news event that happened this past week that a lot of people are starting to forget about, but I think that it bears talking about as well. This past week, the network that hosts your favorite news anchor decided that they were going to put the debates on rather than MSNBC or anything else that's centrist and fair and balanced. So, on Tuesday and Wednesday, we had the second round of Democrat debates. CNN put them on, of course, and we had some little dust-ups. This wasn't nearly as viewed as the first set of debates, and the reactions of the debaters showed that, but we had some highlights out of this that I think that we need to talk to while we're going into this. Are you ready to
Yeah,
spend the rest of the show talking about CNN?
I am ready to talk about CNN.
So, what do you think about the fact that CNN was putting these on first?
You know what? I could understand CNN putting him on.
Mm.
I can't understand having Don Lemon up as the host. He is absolutely the worst. He's worse than Chris Cuomo. He's worse than any of them. He is absolutely terrible. He might as well have started every question he said as, "We all agree that Trump is a racist, but what do you think about?" So, yeah, that was my take on it. Is Don Lemon is, well, besides being the dumbest man on television, he's just the absolute worst anchor there is. So that was my first takeaway from it. The second takeaway I had was that there was the first night of the debate just put me to sleep.
Yeah, I missed most of that first night, to be completely honest.
I stayed up for it and managed to keep my eyes open, but it was brutally tiring.
Hmm.
If I think the only thing that could have saved that is if Warren and Sanders had decided to go at each other a little bit because they're fighting over the same voter pool.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people that say that when Sanders does drop out, a lot of his vote is going to go to Warren, which I don't necessarily believe.
I don't know if Sanders' ego will let him drop out.
You don't think?
I think he's in there for the long haul because he is so pissed about 2016 and losing out to Hillary. He thinks he was robbed
Hmm.
and he is going to stay in there until the very end. Now, mind you, the way the democratic process works is they say they got rid of their super delegates, but
Right,
they didn't.
but the media is still going to cover for them and try and put the person they coordinated in.
Absolutely. What happens is if they go to their convention and they don't get a clear winner on first vote, the super delegates kick in,
Hmm.
and whoever the party wants to put up is going to be put up. So they didn't change much of anything.
Right.
They delayed the super delegates for one round.
Now, before we go into some of the highlights off of this, I do want to talk about CNN's role in this as far as how it was transmitted and some of the things that came out of the fact that they were the ones that were putting this on. Now, as I mentioned, I did not watch the most part of the first debate. I was still at work. I spent a lot of the last hour at work trying to find this all on YouTube, and to no avail. I couldn't find it. I couldn't get to D Live on my phone. I know that one of my friends was casting it on D Live, but I couldn't find that on there, so I didn't get to watch a lot of it. I didn't want to suck the data up driving to watch the whole thing on CNN.com going home, where YouTube draws a little bit less data than CNN does. But I was watching on the second night, and there were some other live streams that were going on as well. Matt Christensen and Blonde had their regular Wednesday call-in show. On YouTube, they didn't actually recast the debate. Matt was watching the debate in a separate window during the stream, just kind of watching for highlights, and he brought the volume up between callers a couple times, and 48 minutes in, he got a hard strike on his channel, and he got his live streaming privileges suspended for 90 days. Now, he appealed and was able to get back onto YouTube for his regular Sunday night show, but that was a bit of a panic attack, I know, for him. And from what I understand, we watched the debate on D Live. I was on Stephen Ignoramus's show, but over on Twitch as well. Twitch was banning people left and right for recasting the debate, and I'm sure that CNN had their hands into this. So did you catch any of this at all?
No, I was actually home, so I was able to watch it on TV live.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, CNN is just the worst. They are, they are, they are as bad as NBC, MSNBC, but they don't admit that they're a leftist group.
Right, and the censorship side of it. Yeah, it's you know
Yeah,
people are wanting to talk about this, and I think that's a part. I don't know necessarily that it's a copyright thing that they were trying to block. I think they were trying to keep people from discussing it until they
absolutely,
had the chance to set the narrative.
absolutely. That's what it was. Um, CNN always wants to set the narrative. That's that's their goal in everything is to make sure that America sees what they want them to see. So, yeah, if there was something like that going on, I have no doubt that it had to do something with CNN.
Now, one of the criticisms that came out of this particular debate, and I do think that I have to agree with that, Jen the Libertarian was talking about this on her show when she was discussing all of this, was the idea of the opening statements that every candidate put out. Now, opening statements in a debate are an important thing. I've been in a debate, I've been in an online debate before. We did one for charity for St. Jude's on the generational gap where I talked to Robert about gun control and what it means in the 20th century, or the 21st century rather. We had an opening statement, but the problem or the difference there is that it was just the two of us, so our 3-minute opening statements took 6 minutes. When you've got 10 people up on the stage each night, giving each one of them a 3-minute opening statement, across the 5 hours that this was cast, that ate up an hour right then and there. That an hour of those 5 hours was all gone
Yeah,
with
yeah,
no policy prescription.
and exactly. And I said those opening statements were there was nothing to them.
Mm-hmm.
There was absolutely nothing to them. Although on the first night of the debate, I think that's where all of the candidates tried to get their digs in on Trump. They seem to be concentrating on Trump in the opening statements.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, that whole to me the whole debate was just you know twice as long as it should have been. But you got to do something when you got 10 people that all everyone wants to talk.
Well, yeah, once you've got 20 people up there on the stage, I mean, a lot of people thought the 17 people for 2016 for the Republican side were a clown car, but I mean, you've got so many people that you've got to exclude people, and you're still making this a 2-night event.
Speaking of the clown car, we do have to bring up the person who on the first night there
Mm-hmm.
was driving the clown car,
Oh.
and that is Marianne Williamson. If the Democrats are in a clown car, she is the chauffeur
Yeah.
because she is out there.
Oh,
But
I hope she makes it to the
I've
end.
heard some analysis that says that she is treating this election the same way Trump does.
Mm-hmm.
That instead of talking about policies, she's talking about beliefs and about emotions and about what we're going to do for America, and that's the kind of thing that none of the others are talking like that. And what does Trump do? What was Trump's campaign about? He
Make
just
America.
hammered "Make America Great Again," and it wasn't about I'm going to do this, this, that, and the other thing, and here's how I'm going to do it, and this is the percentage I'm going to lower your taxes, and no, it was "Make America Great Again," and that's the same gospel that Marianne is talking.
So, one of the first things I do want to ask you right away, as we're getting into the substance of everything, now that we've talked the structure down to death, is on each night, who do you think won, and why do you think that person won each night?
Uh, on the first night, it's hard to say. I think among the general public, the winner might have been John Delaney because he's the one that person up there that came across sounding sane. And while everyone was willing to train their guns on him because he was the only one that was talking liberal, not leftist,
Mm-hmm.
um, he's the only one that didn't come off sounding like he wants open borders and free shit for everybody.
Right. No, he's an
Um,
actual Union Democrat, and I mean, we need more of that.
yeah, but as to the winner among the Democrat voters, I don't know. I don't know. It was probably a toss up between Sanders and Warren because the two of them just attacked everybody else instead of going after each other.
What about the second night?
Uh, the second night, a lot of people think that Tulsi Gabbard got good digs in there at the end towards Kamala Harris,
Hmm.
and she did. I think she did damage. Um, the one who really impressed me the most was who was it? It was Yang there? Yeah, Yang was on the second night,
Yeah, he was.
and Yang struck me as again he came off as being the one who sounded sane among all of them. I think Biden did well on the second night just for not falling apart completely, and he did fire back a few times about about things that people said to him, and I think he scored some points back when people hit him. Um, but as to who won among the Democrat voters, who knows? And I got to say this: is anyone who thinks that who thinks they're a Republican but thinks they could find themselves voting for Tulsi Gabbard, you're not really a Republican because she's as far left as any of them.
Hmm.
She's just a leftist who doesn't believe in foreign intervention.
Well, speaking of right wingers, one of the big topics, and it sounded like three or four candidates brought this up, was the fact that if anybody was asked a direct question, then asked to defend it because they virtue signaled around it, that person accused either the moderator or his opponents of bringing up right wing talking points, and that
Yes.
was that was a deflection that I couldn't deal with. I'm not gonna lie.
No, I'm with you on that. It did seem like anytime someone did not want to answer a question, it was immediately, thrown out that that was a GOP talking point.
Which in a debate, I mean, you would think that you would want to bring up the talking or the GOP talking points because that's what you're going to be
Yeah.
defending against coming into the
You're going to
future.
want to shoot them down in the general debate, that's for sure.
Yeah. So I don't. These clown car debates seem, and this is all primary debates. I'm not going to lie. It's part of the reason that Kamala Harris is in the position that she's in right now because she's never had to run against a Republican for anything in her life, and she's trying to do the same thing as she's done in California for every elected office that she's held. It's try to outleft the next person, and all 25 of these people right now, whether they got on the debate stage or not, are trying to jump up and outleft each other.
Yeah, except for a few outliers. You've got Andrew Yang seems pretty steady. I mean, he's pretty far left because he's definitely I would say more of a libertarian left. Um, and Delaney is definitely more of a centrist as far as the Democrats go.
Hmm.
And Biden comes off at least as being, stable and a little more towards the center. But yeah, the rest of them are steering hard left, right into the wall.
Well, speaking of steering hard left, too, it seems to me that Sanders was under attack for what I did see out of the first night. And it seemed like everybody had their crosshairs on him. And I mean, I can understand why. He's part of the reason that the party has drawn itself out to the left and all these people have to run out and be as crazy as they can be against each other. I'm sure that if it hadn't been for Sanders in 2016, A, Trump probably wouldn't have won because Hillary wouldn't have to try and outleft him, but
Right.
B, all of these people wouldn't be trying to say the next craziest thing or give away more stuff to try and win a voter base to try and win the primary and hope to God that they can win in the general.
I agree with you on that. And the one thing that surprised me was the one person who didn't seem to want to score points off of Sanders was Elizabeth Warren. And like I said, I think they're going for the same voter pool. They're both, they're both strongly in that socialist camp. And I just I don't understand why she didn't go in for the kill on him a couple times.
Well, there's optics involved, so
That's true. That's true.
and that's the same thing. I've got looking at the show notes here, and that's absolutely the next thing is Warren versus Sanders. We were looking to see round two. Because
Yes, we were. I have to point out one thing is somebody put up a video of John Delaney and and he's looking around and he's blinking and his face is turning red while Elizabeth Warren is right off the side of the screen just squawking and he put it up unedited video. I wish I could remember who it was. I did retweet it. And then I also retweeted it as TFW. Please enter your responses below. So we got a couple. I got a couple of good ones off of that. But man, he just looked like he was like, "What the hell is she talking about? She's crazy." And yeah, that's just they all to me they all came off as crazy on night one.
yeah, they're all standing back and trying to outleft each other. And that came true too when we were talking about the healthcare aspect of all of this.
Yeah,
Did you
who's going
notice
to give
that?
away the most? Who's going to give away the most to Americans and then to illegal immigrants, and then eventually we're just going to start running healthcare for people in other countries.
Yeah. Well, that was part of what set people apart too. Like you had said, Delaney seemed like he was the more centrist and the more moderate candidate out of all of this. But one of the things that kept coming up, and this was something that they kept grouping into the right wing talking points idea, was the fact that this healthcare plan that these people have, the Medicare for all, is going to cost an ass load of money.
Absolutely, I think the current 10-year on it is something in the area of $34 trillion,
Yeah.
which is insane.
And yeah, a couple of the candidates were up on this, and they were called into question. How
That's
are you going to
that's
pay for it?
that's 40% of America's GDP over the next 10 years.
Yeah, that's hoping that the economy doesn't go up at all or doesn't crash.
Exactly, and in order to pay for it, you're going to have to crash the economy with high taxes. The economy can withstand taxes being raised slowly, but when you jack up taxes in order to pay for some of these crazy programs, that causes the kind of ripple that it knocks the chair out from under it.
Now, you're from Pennsylvania, and that's a very rich union state. I actually grew up in a union household. One of the interesting questions that I heard out of this debate, and it's something that I wanted to discuss, was that Senator Sanders was asked directly if his Medicare for All plan was going to be any better than what the union workers were getting out of their union paid health care. And that's that is brilliant right there, because as much disdain as I have for the union as it is currently structured, I can't ignore the fact that I grew up under a union healthcare program that they have negotiated for very, very good healthcare programs, the likes of
Absolutely.
which the rest of us don't have access to.
Mrs. Journalism Ader is a teacher
Hmm.
in Philadelphia, and we have a very decent health care plan that her union has been able to negotiate. And I could probably get a slightly better plan from my employer as far as I would like my employer's plan better, but the cost for my plan would be that much higher that it's not worth it.
Oh, absolutely. And I talk to my mom about this too from time to time, and she keeps saying that we're very lucky we've got your father's health care plan, and I don't remember anybody ever pulling anything out of pocket or any sort of hardship when one of us had to go to the doctor when we were growing up at all.
Now, I come from probably a slightly earlier time than you, Ed.
Hmm.
I was growing up in the 70s.
I wasn't even
I
thought
think
of yet by that point.
so. I remember that, when we went to the doctor back then, we didn't have health insurance.
Hmm.
That my father ran his own business. My mother worked in his business, and she did some part-time work. We didn't have health insurance. We went to the doctor, we had to pay for it. If God forbid we had to go to the hospital, then we had to pay for it.
Yeah.
And it was. But the difference was is you went into the hospital and they would tell to you, This is what we're going to have to do, and this is what your bill is going to be. You can't get a bill from anybody now. You don't know how much anything's going to be.
Well,
There's no
you can't price
pricing.
shop.
No, there's no pricing anywhere. So it's crazy the way it is now. I think insurance should be catastrophic only. And I think if you're going to go to the doctor for your annual checkup, you should pay for it out of pocket. And I think that would bring down costs because a large amount of the costs in these doctors' offices having to pay all these administrators to handle all of this billing through the insurance companies and to the government and whatever. It's a lot of extra work.
Well, I want to step back for a second and go back to what Sanders' idea was, or his answer to the question, because that's kind of where we got off on a tangent. But tangents are great on this show. I love
Sure.
some of the tangents that we have on this show. Um, Sanders had an answer, and he said that it didn't matter whether or not it was better insurance; it was comprehensive.
Right. It's going to include everything.
Yeah,
It's going to include your dental and your eyeglasses. He I don't know. It's also going to include 6 month wait times.
yeah, that's what I'm most worried about too. And I mean, I look at some of the things now, and I've met some absolute hypochondriacs, people who
Hmm.
were always sick, or always claimed that they were sick, and they were never really that sick.
Yeah. I have family in Canada, and uh, depending on the time of the year and all of that sort of thing, you may not even be able to get in to see your doctor in time for whatever illness you have. You call to make an appointment, and they can see you in 3 weeks. So if you got the flu, forget getting a prescription for Tamiflu. You
Yeah,
can't even get
absolutely.
into the doctor until after you've had the flu for 3 weeks. By that time, it's most likely run its course. So
Of course, we had one of the biggest set of fireworks that happened throughout the night, and that was the dust up that happened between Tulsi Gabbard and Kamala Harris. Now, we all went into this expecting to see Kamala Harris go back for round two against Joe Biden. In fact, I
yeah,
was
that's what I
actually
was
kind of
looking
hoping
at.
for that.
I was looking for that too.
But Tulsi
And
Gabbard turned around and called Kamala Harris's prosecutorial record into question and accurately pointed out the fact that Kamala Harris, who wants to be more generous on crime and the First Step Act and try to be more generous than President Trump is, has prosecuted 1,500 people for simple possession crimes and put them in prison. She's also withheld evidence to try and keep people in prison longer and was accused of keeping people in prison to bolster the pockets of California's private prison system and give them cheap labor for that. And the crowd went
absolutely,
nuts
she
over
was the
this.
top cop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, that she definitely scored some points off Kamala, and you could see it in the numbers after the debate. I think Kamala's numbers went down by about 4 or 5% immediately after the debate, and at that point, Tulsi Gabbard was trending on Google, and everyone was looking her up because a lot of the Democrats hadn't even heard of her until this.
Well, we've got the image up on the screen here, and this is a tweet that I pulled out of Politico here. And Politico says Tulsi Gabbard hit Kamala Harris harder tonight than Joe Biden has ever been able to, says editor at Politico Charlie. She laid out progressive criticisms frequently leveled at Harris's record as AG. And this they were doing live, of course. It was live analysis and top moments, but they put the picture of the quote up, and I will actually read what Tulsi said to Kamala verbatim. Harris, in brackets, put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. Fact check true, by the way. I mean, we all heard that on the interview, and we've all been talking about it, of course.
Not to mention she lied about it because she said she was listening to Tupac in college.
Yeah, and they were like, what was Tupac, like 14 when she was in college?
Yeah, something like that.
So, yeah, and the reaction is exactly what you would expect it to be. I mean, you've got people on the right that are praising Tulsi, and a lot of people who claimed that they were on the right, but I knew were in play as regular independents, are now saying that, it is going to be Tulsi 2020, and a lot of them are jumping off the Trump train over this, which surprises me. I'm not going to lie.
I don't understand that because I mean Tulsi is still a socialist.
Yeah, that's true, and I don't know, but I mean, to look at what she got off of this here, let's have a look at the maps as shown for the most searched Democrat candidates. Now, Google Trends put out this chart, of course, and it showed a handful of people that were looking up Democrat candidates before or going into night two, or not even night two, going into the debates for the second time. And it looked like Joe Biden had a vast control over the country as far as Google searches went. There were a couple little things here and there otherwise, but for the most part, the country showed as Biden. And during the debate and a little bit afterwards, from what I understand, it shows that the entire United States was trending on searching for Tulsi Gabbard on Google.
I think it was except Montana.
No, it wasn't even except
Oh,
Montana.
okay.
Montana
Okay.
Montana did have a variation on the first night because all the Montanaites had to go and look up and make sure that that was actually their governor because none of them knew.
I think you're right on that.
I've heard Montanans say that. My partner for Freedom Scoop is from Montana.
Sounds about right.
So I mean, I think Tulsi's going to get flash in the pan out of this because I'm sure the media and the CNN apparatus is going to try and hold her down off of this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, she's not the party choice.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit later on who we do think the party choice is. I want to take a second though before we get too far into a lot of other things here and talk about the fact that everybody on the stage, and including some of the people in the audience, seem to be against Obama at this point.
That was bizarre. Especially on the second night,
Mm-hmm.
they seem to be taking pot shots at Obama like crazy. And yeah, that really struck me as weird. I mean, I guess compared to where they are now, as far as left to right. I mean, we considered him far left, would still do, and he's a centrist to them now.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, yeah, and that's just, I mean, there are even people saying that Obama couldn't run as a Democrat anymore. He would have to run as a Republican if he ran for a third term.
I don't think he can make it as a Republican, but yeah, he doesn't fit in the Democratic Party anymore. They've moved way beyond him to the left.
Now, the ACA was one of the things that was under attack, and of course, there are a lot of people that believe that the ACA was something that was meant to fail. I've read the ACA front to back before it was released, and I knew right away that it was intended to fail. It was intended to get a lot of people hooked on government insurance and then pull the rug out from under them so that they demanded to have a single payer system.
I agree. Yeah.
But this was called completely into question as saying that Joe and Barack were not going far enough when they were putting this into place.
Well, I think they got as much as they could from it, but but at the same time, yeah, they didn't make the left happy when they did it. I remember when it was passed, there was a lot of people. There were a lot of people on the left saying, that this didn't go far enough, and that there's no real public option. That the insurance companies need to be put out of business.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, we all knew that this was coming. And Barack is kind of sitting in that weird point. Like you said, you don't think that he could make it as a Republican. And I think you're right. He's too far left for even the Republican Party, which is shifting very far to the left from where it was just 10 years ago. But he couldn't make it as a Democrat right now either,
No, no.
especially with the protests that were going on during the debate. Now, from what I was told, I came into it a little late, but in the first 20 minutes of the debate, there were two sets of protests that were caught and dealt with very quickly by the staff over at CNN. But I did get to see the third protest go off live without a hitch. And I mean, you could hear the people were moving further away from the microphone, but the crowd started chanting 3 million deportations while Joe Biden was talking about his immigration policy.
Right, right.
Could you shed any light on what the other two were? Because, like I said, I completely missed
I
those two.
didn't. I couldn't. Yeah, I couldn't hear them, and they very quickly kind of whatever they had as far as microphones near the crowd, they had those shut off real fast. And they moved them out real quickly.
Oh, they cut
So I didn't
microphones?
hear
Well,
what they
I
were
suppose Yang
chanting.
was on the stage.
Well, I think they had microphones in the crowd so that people could cheer,
Hmm.
so they could get the they were hoping for some good taglines to come out of it.
You mean seal clapping?
Yes, absolutely.
Or,
So
or. I'm going to get this channel shut down yet.
did you just refer to the Democrats as animals?
No, but now that that soundbite is out there, I sure have. Because you know somebody's
Sorry,
going to
Ed, I
bring
didn't
that
mean to
up.
put you out.
So,
Sorry, I didn't mean to lose your channel for you.
one of the last things that I want to talk about coming out of this debate had to do with Andrew Yang, since we're talking about him. Andrew Yang had an interesting answer when he came out with when he was asked about climate change. He started talking about automation because Andrew Yang can miraculously somehow tie everything that he talks about back to automation. And I do see a lot of people who are in play in centrist still that can do the exact same thing when you try and debate them on anything. Everything is going to be about the evil automation right now. Yang did very good at that.
Yes.
But while he was up on the stage and talking about climate change, he was asked what we need to do to prevent it from happening, and he said that we're already too late. So we need to implement vast, sweeping policies in place, but we also need to start moving people to higher ground. What did you see on that?
I saw that online as a tweet, and Ed, you know what I tweeted back?
Well, I think
My
the
my response
I think the
my
audience needs to
response
see
was
that too.
Ed Yang, the world is over.
Well, not Jim Acosta, the journalisminator, on July 31st tweeted, in quotes, "The world has already ended. Dash at Andrew Yang, probably."
I thought that was one of my better ones.
Yeah. Well, and it's absolutely right. I mean, they kept shifting the goalpost. When
Oh,
the
it
Green
was.
New Deal came out, Cortez tried to say that we had 12 years.
I think
And,
Beto knocked it down to 10.
yep, Beto knocked it down to 10. And now Yang is still are out there trying to tell us now that it's already too late and the world is already fucked at this point.
The world ended when the Democrat debates started. Uh, yeah, listen, as someone who has lived through multiple renditions of "The World Is Over" from the environmentalists, I remember back in the '70s when it was pollution is going to cause an ice age,
Hmm.
so it was global cooling.
Yeah.
Then in the early '80s, they had said that Manhattan would be underwater by like 1995. And then by the time I was getting out of high school at the late '80s, they were saying that Manhattan would be underwater by 2005. And then right around Y2K, that time they were saying that it was going to take until 2012. And yeah, well, so they've been wrong right along there all ever since. I had a good tweet I put up about this in response to a Neil deGrasse Tyson post about global warming.
Oh, I didn't see that
I,
one.
I put up the timeline on it. I'm not sure if it'll come up anymore. That might have been under my old look at me. If not, it was several weeks back. But yeah, I posted up that same thing. 1995, the world's going to end in this date, and 2000, the world's going to end here. 2005, and I said, listen, when you can get your models straight, come talk to me about when the world's going to end. But I have yet to see a model that's been even close to true. So
Well, I think we've got the majority of the highlight reel from the debates done. Let's talk a little bit about the aftermath. Now, one of the
okay,
first things that I want to talk about is I want to go back to Tulsi Gabbard for a second. And immediately after the debates ended, Twitter started a light trying to say that Tulsi Gabbard was a Russian plant, that she was put in place to try and discredit everybody and deliver the victory back to Donald Trump,
I
which is
did see
ridiculous.
I did see something like that. That's definitely tinfoil hat stuff there.
Yeah, that is definitely a stretch under any circumstance. But I
Um,
did see
what I
this.
thought was interesting was that Tulsi Gabbard was trending on Google. She was trending on Yahoo. She was trending on Bing search, but she wasn't trending on Twitter.
Yeah, yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
So, makes you wonder who Jack wants.
Oh, I think I already know who everybody wants. But Stephen
Yeah,
Ignoramus brought up an interesting point here. He tweeted out after this Russian debacle with Tulsi Gabbard, and he says on August 2nd, "Are we going to witness it at real Donald Trump slash at Tulsi Gabbard 2020?" Because they're both in the pockets of the Russians.
yeah. I think we just need to put this whole Russian thing behind us. Um,
Oh, that's not going anywhere, and that's
I
not going
know,
anywhere.
I know it's, you know what, and I will continue to be Jim Acosta as that gets talked about on CNN for as long as I can because it is comedy gold.
I was gonna say, oh yeah, you make fun of CNN and Jim Acosta all day, day in and day out. You know as well as I do that's never going to bed.
Yeah,
And whatever
yeah,
CNN does on it, MSNBC is worse.
exactly, exactly.
Did you see that Maddow's ratings have just absolutely tanked
I
because of
did
the
see
Russian
that.
narrative?
Now, did his tank as bad as Brian Stelter's?
I think they're
Stelter
worse.
lost 40% of his audience from pre-Mueller report to post-Mueller report.
I think uh, I think Maddow is over the 50% mark somewhere.
Wow. I actually put up a post. I said Brian Stelter lost 40% of his audience. That's over half.
So the next debates, though, now it looks like they've already changed some of the regulations to qualify to
You
get
need
into the debate, which is
130,000 individual donors now,
which is
which is
double.
they've knocked a bunch of people out so far. I did see who was it on Twitter that was Steyer. Steyer was on there begging people for $1, and I said, "Oh my goodness, it's the new Eric Swalwell."
Well, he did jump in after Swalwell got out, so
Yeah,
on the same day, I believe.
yeah, that was Swalwell's thing. Is I would
Yep.
see ads coming up on my timeline left and right begging for $1,
Yep. Yeah, just
and
one
now I'm
individual
seeing them
dollar
from
gives him another individual donor.
yeah, now I'm seeing them from Steyer's camp. So is it Steyer or Stayer?
I believe it is Steyer.
I think it is Steyer. So I've
From
yeah, he's had to have come up on my timeline like 6 times in the last day. So
Well, from what I understand as well, and fact check me if this is not correct, but it's not just the number of donors. I believe that everyone has to have at least 2% of the electorate in order to qualify for the debate at this point too, which is going to knock almost everybody out, and we're going to have this as a one night event again.
Yeah, yeah. Oh well, I guess Beto's not going to make it.
He has come up. I'll give him that because I reported on it when he hit zero point 0.0 in the aggregate.
He's a terrible candidate.
But if I remember correctly, that knocks everybody below Yang out, and it brings us to 7 people on the debate stage.
Yeah, that's what I saw last was that there was 7 qualified.
Which Yang shouldn't be the. If you're below Buttigieg at this point, you should be gone.
Yeah,
All you're doing is
yeah,
wasting a bunch of not taxpayer money, but you're wasting a bunch of donor money to essentially cement your next representative
right,
campaign wherever you're representing.
right. Well, and I think Beto is actually going to get out pretty soon because I think he may be looking at the second Senate seat in Texas as opposed to going for president.
Didn't he get his ass slapped once before?
He just recently got beat down by Ted Cruz, so now he's going to run against the other incumbent Republican. I think Beto was a flash in the pan. I don't see him,
Yeah.
you know, I don't
Which
see him
Kamala
doing
was
anything.
too after the first debate. That was an absolute flash in the pan moment. Because she
Yeah.
spiked really hard, but Sticks brought up a good point. It was a Carly Fiorina moment because she did the exact same thing.
Yes, she laid into Biden in the first night, and then the second night she got taken down by a candidate below her.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, we've gone into 2020 watch very extensively. I think this is the most time I've ever spent on this topic on the show. But before we get out of this topic, we have to answer the 3 questions that I always ask before we get out of the topic.
Okay.
So, we haven't seen a new aggregate yet, and I'm still waiting to see that, and I'm kind of excited to see that. But based on the debate performance and based on the statistics that you see right now, statistically, who do you think becomes the nominee for president in
I think
2020 to go against Trump?
I think it's going to be Biden.
You still think it's
I
going to be
think
Biden?
I still think it's going to be Biden. I think that Warren and Sanders both have their egos stoked so much that they're not going to want to drop out. They're fighting for 40%, and the other 60% are going to slide over towards Biden as other people drop out.
Yeah, that's been one of the big conversations as to who's going to get the percentage of the electorates for people as they drop out, and that's been
And
always
if
the
they
question.
go
Is it going to be Warren or Biden?
right, and if they go to a contested convention
Hmm.
after the first votes, the superdelegates come in and they decide it.
I'm a little worried that the super delegates want Warren, though. That's the only wrench that I have into that. But we'll see how
You know what
statistics
though?
go.
We can hope it's Warren because Warren has no shot of beating Trump.
That's true. So,
I
second
think
question.
I think Biden has a chance. I don't think Warren has a chance of beating him.
So, second question. If you had to pick a president from the current field of Democrats that we have running right now, say Trump strokes out on the campaign trail and Pence can't pull it off in the last minutes or anything like that. If you had to pick one of the 25 to be the next president, which one do you, Tim, pick?
I think the only one who makes any sense out of any of them is John Delaney, and he's far to the left of me, but I think he's at least a moderately centrist Democrat as they are. He's one of the last few.
Okay. Last question for pure entertainment value, not any ideals that you want to see in the presidency or not anything statistically. Just what's going to make you laugh the most at the end of September and October? Which of the 25 candidates do you want to see be the nominee to debate Trump?
Oh, listen, if Marianne Williamson can make it in there, she is gold.
You
She
don't
is
know how
just
many
gold.
times I've heard that since that first debate.
She is, you know, unicorns farting rainbows gold.
Oh, we are at 75 minutes already, so I think it's time for us to talk about Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh, that dirtbag.
So this is another story that the tinfoil is out there saying that we're never going to hear about again, just because of the fact that this is now happening with the shooting in El Paso and the shooting in Dayton. But
Hmm.
this past week, Jeffrey Epstein was found in his cell with marks on his neck. People are assuming, of course, that this is a Clinton hit job, but some of the other commentators out there have already brought up alternative theories as to what happened with this and why it happened. Now, the media is citing this as an attempt at suicide. What do you think actually happened?
I think it is an attempted non-suicide.
You think
I
it's a
think he
Clinton
wanted
thing?
to make it. No, I think he wanted to make it look like it was a suicide attempt. I think he's trying to get moved to a better, a nicer prison
Okay. Well,
because I don't buy the Clinton thing. I mean, let's face it, one of the most dangerous things you could be in the world is a Clinton operative who's gone against them. But
yeah, that's true.
but at the same time, I don't think this is. I think if it was the Clinton thing, I think he'd be dead.
Yeah, they don't miss very often, do they?
No, that's my straight up honest truth. I think if the Clintons had put something out on him, he would not have lived through it.
Now, that is, I do buy into that, of course, and I do buy the idea, just given some of the statistics, that this could be an attempted Clinton thing. But one of the things that Ben Shapiro brought up when he was talking about this was the fact that Jeffrey Epstein is very well known in the world. I mean, the inmates out there get some access to TV and news. They're not sitting in there in complete isolation as to what's going on with the world. So they know who this guy is. He is in solitary for 23 out of his 24 hours of the day, and he's in general population for a little bit of time at least. And Epstein is known as a kid diddler. What happens to kid diddlers
Absolutely.
in prison?
Yeah, they usually wind up dead.
Usually it's
I think.
from anal fissures.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility too. I just think that the way it was set up. I mean, let's face it, if you want to kill yourself,
Hmm.
you will find a way to do it. That's why I think it's a fake suicide. Is I think he wanted to make it look like he got attacked or something along those lines in an attempt to get himself moved because he's literally in one of the worst prisons in New York State, one of the worst federal prisons in the country.
As well, he should be.
I agree
I
absolutely.
mean, there's no excuse for that.
No.
And I know people were trying to pin that on the Donald right away. That was the first thing that they were trying to do when Epstein got arrested. Now, and this is the second time he's been arrested for this.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is he needs to be put away for the rest of his life.
Absolutely, he does. I don't know that it's going to happen just because he's got a lot of money and access to really good lawyers, but I don't know.
Yeah, and I think what was it, the Secretary Acosta who ended up going down over this. I think that was a bad, I think he got jobbed on this. I think he was forced to get to give him the deal he gave him,
Hmm.
by people above him. And so I don't think, I think the fact that he was pitted as being the one responsible, I think he kind of got jobbed.
Yeah, that's true, and I'm a little. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that's going on about this that we don't know. There's a lot of stuff that people should have known, and this all should have gone down years before it actually did.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I do see, like I said, I see merit in the Clinton idea because that would be a loose end that they would clean up. That would, I mean, just undo the Clinton legacy because no matter what he did with Lewinsky in the White House and what he was accused of doing and never convicted of in the 70s, he's still seen as a political figurehead for the Democrat Party and for this country.
Oh, sure. Plus, who knows what further aspirations Hillary might have somewhere along the
Oh,
line. You never
Jesus.
know.
Oh, Lord.
I don't think she's going to run for president again, but she probably would look to get an ambassadorship somewhere, and probably somewhere nice and sunny where she can, where they can live out the rest of their lives in relative peace and comfort.
Well, and that's the thing with Clinton, too. I mean, Bill did step out of the light. We didn't hear much out of Bill after he got out of the
No,
presidency.
absolutely.
It's been the Hillary
Well,
Clinton show ever since.
yeah, and you know what? It was the Hillary Clinton show leading up to it.
That's fair.
I think she was riding his coattails the whole way.
Well, and you were a little bit older than I was in 1992, so you were
Yes,
probably closer to the age of reason when that was happening. I
I
mean, I was
actually
busy
was voting
being
age by then.
in 1992 when Clinton was being elected. I was busy being 8.
So yeah, I actually I voted for H.W. Bush that year.
I'm sorry to hear that.
That's one of those choices where times when you have there's just not really a good choice, which seems to happen a lot in American politics.
Yeah, that is definitely a fair assessment of everything. All right. I've got 2 more little quick hitters, and they both relate to the same thing. And then I think it might be time for us to run through the outro here. So, as
Okay.
I said at the beginning of the show, I rarely talk about Hollywood on this program because I don't give a fuck. I'm going to put that completely right out there. These people think, sitting in an ivory tower, they think that they can get away with anything, and they think they can tell us how to think because we pay them a lot of money to pretend to be other people. But these 2 stories here, you can't look past them. I'm
Fire
gonna
away, Ed.
I'm gonna start with a mild one. Now this is somebody who hasn't really been on the screen for very longer, but Saved by the Bell alumnus Mario Lopez a few weeks ago made some comments about trans children. He says that he doesn't want to tell parents what to do in their own homes, but he doesn't think that it's a good idea to let a 3-year-old who the only reason that he knows that a gender is different is because teachers and parents treat the other gender differently, make decisions about his or her own gender. It was a relatively mild comment, I'll give it that, but he got eviscerated for that, and now he's come back and he's apologized for this, which is something that you should never do to begin with. You should never
No, the
apologize.
worst thing he could have done was apologize, because now it's just once you apologize, the pile on starts.
Yeah, they know they can get to you at this point, and I mean, in Hollywood circles, he's in hot water to begin with because I don't necessarily think that Lopez is a right winger, but he's friendly with them.
Yes.
Very much so. I think there's
Yeah,
a better chance that Candace Cameron is a Republican than Mario Lopez is. Well, it's Candace
Yeah.
Beer now, but I mean, you look at the household that they grew up in and you look at her brother, there's a very good chance that she leans to the right and she just doesn't tell anybody about it,
Sure.
which is a good idea in Hollywood. And yeah, there's a better chance of her than Mario Lopez, but he's willing to have the conversation, which is a dangerous thing to do in Hollywood. Look at what they did to
That's
Trump.
exactly it. That's exactly it. You cannot step away from the woke line, or you will get hammered in Hollywood.
Well, yeah, and I mean, what's the last thing we've actually seen Kirk Cameron in? Candace was
Well,
safe because she had her titular role and her signature role to revise.
right. Cameron's been in a whole lot of stuff. We've just not seen it.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just Kurt either. It's or Kirk rather. I mean, Kevin Sorbo.
Right.
When's the last time you saw that guy in something major? Andromeda,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he's another one. I
Uh,
mean, he's openly right wing.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's several right-wing guys, and they've all basically been ostracized. They're not given any jobs anymore.
What do you think about the actual comment that Lopez made? Where
I
do you
think
stand
he's a
on
hun-
that?
I think he's 100% right on
I,
that. I don't understand. At that point, if a child is being told, if a child thinks there should be a girl when they're a boy, it's because their parents are telling them that.
yeah, that's. I hadn't thought about that before you said that, but yeah, there's got to be a lot of merit to that as well. I mean, we see some of these children out there too, where they talk about the fact that their parents suddenly have all three of their children, and all three of them turned out to be trans.
Yeah,
And what the children are like 12, 10, and 8.
yeah, that's it's to me. If there's a child that's trans at the age of 3, it's parents doing it. They don't have the wherewithal at that point to understand what the difference is between a boy and a girl yet. And if their parents are doing it based on the fact that a little boy likes to play with dolls, that's just the silliest thing. My son, God bless him, my son had girls down the street that he liked to play with, and he would go down there. And up until the point he was probably 6 years old, he would go down there. He would play dress up with them. They'd all dress up as princesses,
Yeah.
and they'd play, and he would do it. And then somewhere, probably around 6 years old, he finally said, "I don't think I want to play princess anymore." He just decided he didn't want to do that.
Well, and that's part of the thing too. I mean, if you look at, I'm not sure how big of a town or city that you live in, where you live with your son, but I can tell you this: I grew up in a town so small that I'm not going to say the name of it because it would be very easy for somebody to go back and figure out who I am and dox me based on the fact that I said that I grew up in this town.
Yeah,
But in this town, you had to have mixed gender friendships as kids because there were
right,
8 kids in the town.
right,
So it was either sit by yourself and play video games, which I did do a lot of that as well, but either that or go out and play with boys and girls at the same time. There
right.
was there was no way around it. And yes, I've played dress up with the girls, and the girls have played football and sports with me and my guy friends.
Exactly. Yep.
This wasn't a trans thing when we were growing up in the 90s. It was just, we had no choice.
Right. Right. No, I grew up in a similar situation. I grew up in a very small town in upstate New York, and yeah, you ended up having to play with the kids who happened to be in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
And in our case, we were outside of the town quite a ways, so we were, there were only 10, 15 houses nearby, so I played with whoever was there.
And I mean, once you grow up and you were off at school, you formed more hardened bonds with not just guys that you were friends with that had similar ideas, but I mean, you formed more hardened bonds with people that had more similar ideas. But I mean,
Right.
some of that did fall along gender lines just for obvious reasons.
Absolutely.
But yeah, when you're 8 and your town has 300 people in it, you're gonna be playing with kids of both. And like I said, you're gonna be playing dress up, you're gonna be playing princess, and you're gonna be playing superhero and football. That's just the
Yeah,
way it is.
exactly. Exactly.
Well, last topic that I want to talk about here, and we're gonna start out. And I told you what the picture was off mic, but picture's worth 1,000 words on this one. So during the premiere of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Lena Dunham reportedly ran up to Brad Pitt and tried to plant a kiss on him in front of all of the cameras. This was widely politicized, of course, as soon as it happened. including the fact that this was kind of a him too movement. Now, I don't have a video or anything of the running, but I've got a picture of the kiss up, and you can see that Brad has his face kind of half turned away, but you see kind of the difference between them. And I'm not going to
You'd
try
turn
and,
away too if you saw Lena Dunham running at you.
well, I'm not going to go down that road. I'm gonna try and take the high ground onto this, but I mean, to look at the difference between Brad Pitt and Lena Dunham, and let's not take into account that I believe Brad Pitt is still married. I don't know if he is or not. But I mean, you've got one of the best looking men in the world, as proven by several magazines numerous times in the world. And I mean, I live in Wisconsin. I look at Lena Dunham and I see, an average looking person.
Right.
She's not an ugly person by any measure that I can see, but I mean, she's not 10 out of 10 supermodel
Well, in
status
Hollywood,
either.
she's a 5.
Well,
Yeah,
absolutely.
or 4.
But it's the idea of what would be the difference if the roles were reversed on this.
Oh, absolutely. There would be, especially with the way he looked like he was not happy about it and kind of turning his head.
Yeah.
If a guy had run up to a girl and did that, he would be torn to pieces.
Well, especially
Online.
especially the disparity between the two of them too.
Yes.
Now, most people who know me in real life have seen the screensaver that I had when I was in my 20s. I since got rid of because it was highly inappropriate. But I mean, everybody in the world knows that I have had a very large crush on Ashley Tisdale for a very long time. And I'm not going to lie about it here. I mean, you see me from pretty much pecs up, but I've got a little bit of a stomach going on underneath this here. What do you think? How do you think this would be different if I ran up to Ashley Tisdale and tried to do the same thing?
Well, first of all, I don't know if you get past their security, but
Yeah.
if you manage to, you would be roasted. You'd probably end up in jail.
I would still be.
This
I'd still be pulling the police baton out of my ass.
exactly. You'd have so many taser burns on you, you wouldn't know what to do.
But I mean, this is just coming from me as average run-of-the-mill center of the country guy versus a Hollywood starlet. But
Right.
I mean, let's step that up a sec. Say that I was somewhat famous, and Lena Dunham hasn't really had any major titles before Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. She's had a couple, but I mean, she doesn't have the acting credit that Pitt does,
No.
obviously. But I mean, say that I've been in a couple movies myself and I tried the same thing, still, looking the same as I do. And the results, I think, would be absolutely the same. I would be blackballed from Hollywood. I would never be allowed to work again, and
Oh, sure.
I would have scathing remarks written against me in TMZ and every other outlet that there is out there.
Oh, you'd have to delete your social media accounts.
Well, not only social media accounts, I mean, I would be back to living in a rural town of 300 people in northern Wisconsin because it'd be the only place that I know that people wouldn't be able to find me.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a
Absolutely.
terrible double standard to this. But nobody's talking about
because
it.
and the reason there is a double standard is for the same reason that there is a Me Too movement, is because men are the aggressors. When a woman runs up and kisses a man, the guy's supposed to be kind of flattered. But if a guy runs up and kisses a woman, then she thinks, hey, you're, well, depending on the woman, but she's woke enough, she's, immediately thinking you're assaulting her.
Well, I mean, you get the short end of the stick on the Me Too side of it. I'm not going to lie about it. But, I mean, there's the other double standard, too, that you get kind of the long end of the stick on that. I think back to the 90s when I grew up. You saw, they didn't report on it much, but you saw it from time to time. You saw bras and panties and all kinds of stuff going up on the stage at a Backstreet Boys concert.
Oh, yeah.
You never heard about a jockstrap landing on stage during the Spice Girls.
No. Although I have heard stories about Joan Jett concerts.
I think we just showed the generational divide here.
Never been to one myself. I wanted to, but I've heard stories about those.
So, do you think Dunham gets anything out of this versus getting roasted by right wing podcasts?
No, that's going to be as far as it goes. She's going to get, we're going to tweet about it and have a good time and laugh, and that's it's going to fall away.
And I'm going to go to bed tonight thinking about kissing Ashley Tisdale.
It's a good way to go to bed.
Well, I think I'm out of topics here. What do you think? I know we're over the hour and a half mark already, so.
I think we've covered it all, Ed.
So the last thing that I always ask my guests before we end, because we talk about so many negative things on the show, and we need to end on a positive note. Although I'm sure we achieved that before this, but nevertheless, tradition is tradition. So I want you to describe a hobby that you have for us that has nothing to do with work or has nothing to do with politics. It could be an album you're listening to, an instrument you've picked up, a sport that you're playing, a video game that you've tried out, just something you do to try and unwind outside of the messy world of politics and commenting and making fun of Jim Acosta.
My son started playing Pokemon Go about a year ago, and so I started one up on my phone, and he's got his tablet that he uses, and that's something we do now. We go out on the weekend if the weather is nice, and we walk around a park nearby, and we catch a lot of Pokemon together and battle in gyms, and you actually meet other people out there that are playing, and so it's kind of fun.
To quote Tommy Chong, that's beautiful, man. Well, I want to thank the audience for taking the time to listen, of course, and if you'd like to finish the conversation with me or you'd like to comment on anything, you can reach me. You can find me on Twitter. That is at edsblogtwitter with a 1 in place of the I. You can email me at edsblogtwitter@gmail.com. We just added a Facebook page. I believe that is Edsblog 101. I'll have that linked in the description below. I'm also on Minds and Gab, and I've been trying to be more active on both of those as well, so look for me there. If you want to finish the conversation with Tim, tell us where they can find you.
Pretty much my only social media presence that I use is my Twitter handle. It's at journalismator. That's journalism, ATOR.
And that will be linked in the description below. Once again, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to watch this on YouTube. If you're going down to find that link for Tim's Twitter handle, while you're on your way by, hit that like button. Lets YouTube know what people should be watching. And hit that subscribe button as well. And we are also on BitChute with the same options. Thank you again if you were listening back to this on an audio platform. We are on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. And remember, if you're on iTunes, leave us that 5-star rating and a good review. That helps us move up the charts. Ed's World is once again proudly partnered with the Freedom Scoop Media Group. Remember, writers, if you want to be a part of this circus that we have going on, we are still holding open casting calls for writers. Send me an email and we will get you set up with a sample article. As we always say on this show, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts, draw your own conclusions. Tim, you have last word.
Thank you, Ed. It's been a pleasure tonight. I'll look for you on Twitter.
Take care, everyone.